Hi sewing friends, so it's Anne here and I want to talk to you about two things today. First of all, I want to talk to you about a really unusual vintage pattern haul, pre-cut, that I got from a local fabric store. And I also want to talk to you about Tauko. So I walked into my local fabric store and the fabric store owner said, "Hey, we have tacos." And I was like, "What?" Because that sounds great. But she was talking about Taukos. So Tauko is a sewing magazine out of, I think, Finland. But the way she described it, and I will link to her video in my blog post, which is at sewparadise.com. She did a reel on this, but this is a cross between a beautiful arty fashion, not fashion, but more textiles and makers kind of magazine and patterns. So I just kind of want to flip through here real quick for you, just to show you. I mean, obviously this, coat on the cover is really pretty, but they have a lot of, like this particular issue has a lot of basics in here, but they're all beautifully photographed, just to give you an idea of the quality of this publication. It feels like a book. I mean, I've had books flimsier than this, right? So it's a really beautiful piece. Now this was $30 at my local fabric store, and but you get the quality of it. Now the patterns are included, and there's a little line drawing usually on the Tauko website every month of things. Now there's a couple patterns in here that, and I'll just give you a flip to the pattern page to show you. So there's a couple patterns in here that I'm definitely going to make the way that they intended, and then there's a couple that I might style differently. So just to give you an idea of the pattern page, we've got some really nice basics here in this piece. We got a couple dresses, we have a coat, there's some pants, a basic tee, a robe. There's a lot of options in this particular issue, and every issue has different patterns. So it's a little bit like a cross between Berta Style and a fine arty textile magazine. As my local fabric store owner described this, this is a curl up with a cup of tea book. And like I said, I've had paperbacks that didn't feel this heavy. So this is a quality piece. So strongly recommend if you can get it from your local fabric store. I wouldn't have them ship it to you. Would be kind of pricey. It's pretty heavy. But if your local fabric store carries it, I would definitely pick this up. So I really like this. But she also pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I have something for you." So as it turns out, they got a donation. And the donation was pre-cut patterns. And they happen to be 1990s jeans. This one right here. So you can see that this is a, kind of a loose cut jean. It's, it's a standard jean. It's a high-waisted jean. So you can see that. This is totally from the 1990s. I'm surprised I don't own this, except I wasn't sewing jeans back then. I haven't been sewing jeans now either, but I guess I'm going to start. This is already pre-cut, and it's pre-cut into light denim, which I'm going to show you right here. I mean, when I say pre-cut, I mean, friends, it is pre-cut. Look at that. And it's in this light denim here, just like on the pattern cover. So I'm definitely going to sew those. Now, it might not be my exact size. This is a size 14, pattern 14. But I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple quick measurements first, just to make sure I don't need to make the side seams like 3/8 of an inch or something. Which, if you, instead of 5/8, if you go down to 3/8, you get essentially, because there's 4 pieces, there's inseam and outseam of each pattern piece. If you can get an extra 1/8, you can get up to 1/8, quarter, half, 1. You can get up to a whole inch bigger just by narrowing the side seams a little bit. So I may be able to get some adjustment there. I might have to do some other fancy footwork. We'll see. I just have no idea how they're going to fit, but I'll have to do some measuring. So anyway, vintage jeans that are already pre-cut that somebody cut. And then she also gave me another pair. These ones here, which are more of a classic straight jean. And these are actually made in, these are actually cut out in black and white. So this person really intended to make themselves a whole wardrobe of jeans and never did. And I want to talk about that for a little bit. So I never do this. I never pre-cut things. And maybe I don't know the whole story behind this donation, so I can't say for sure. But I will tell you that oftentimes what happens is people sew. I mean, somebody cut these out in the 1990s and never sewed them. So one of two things happened. They got out of sewing. They got to a bigger size and just said, "I'm not going to make these anymore." Maybe they passed away. I don't know the story, but what I do know is that there are 2 pairs of jeans here that somebody took the time and care to really want to make, 1990s jeans, that somebody really wanted to take the time to make, and I am going to honor them by finishing them. So I'm going to move them up a little bit in the queue. I'm going to have to use my sale making machine because my regular machine is still in the shop. They're trying to fix it. I may have to send it away to get fixed. I don't know. I can't use the kids' machine on it. It's just not powerful enough. So I'm probably going to get my sale making machine and sew these denim jeans on that machine. So I did want to really talk about the idea that you might cut something and never sew it, because that's sobering, right? I mean, we always think of our pattern stashes as, you know, oh, I just have a few extra fabrics in my stash. I could probably open a fabric store with mine, but you know, I have a few extra things in my fabric stash. What if something happens to you? What happens to your stash? What happens to all those plans that you had? And maybe you ought to start using the good stuff now, as I like to say, use the good stuff. So I'm going to use the good stuff, but more important, I'm going to use this stuff. And I think I shared recently on my blog at Sew Paradise that I also inherited another person's stash. A lot of people give me stashes from aunts and grandmothers, so I have a lot of fabric that I have not purchased. And that's just in my stash because people know that I sew and they're like, hey, please take this. Well, a friend of mine, his mom moved into a memory care facility, so she's really not able to sew much anymore. But she had some beautiful coating, wonderful lining, some things that were already done, finished. She's a beautiful camel wool cape that when it gets slightly warmer out, I'm gonna wear. It's unlined though, so it's more for like, you know, 45 degrees or so, not 16 or whatever it is outside right now. So I do really want to talk about the idea that you have to be careful with your stash. And I know, there's always the desire to buy more, both out of a sense of, ooh, new and shiny, and out of a sense of, hey, I want to support my local fabric store, because I pretty much support my local fabric store these days, or somebody else's city's local fabric store. But I think the idea that we've gotten to the point where we have so much that we can't possibly sew it all is very real. And there's a blog post which I'll link here. I'll give you the blog link at Sew Paradise. There's a blog post linked to Stash Beyond Life Expectancy. I am 54 years old. And while I do anticipate sewing a lot more in the next number of years as my children exit the house and go to college and start their lives, I think I might be at the point where I might be at Stash Beyond Life Expectancy unless I really start sewing more. But fortunately for me, it's the joy of the planning, as it is for many of you. It's the joy of thinking about the things that you're going to make. So in my queue, 1990s straight jeans, 1990s baggy jeans, totally wearing this with an oversized boyfriend blazer, you betcha. And if I only wear them a couple times, I'll put them away, and the next time 1990s jeans come back in about 30 years, I'll be 84, and I'll put on the 1990s jeans with my 1990s boyfriend blazers, and it'll be all new again. So I'm not giving up the trends. The things that I make I generally tend to keep. But I'm going to make these now, and I'm going to honor the person that cut them out and left them in their stash and donated it to my fabric store. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You don't normally see a pattern stash haul like that, or a vintage pattern haul. And I've got a ton of vintage patterns that I've showed you before. So I have a lot of vintage. I have vintage 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of 80s, because that's when I really started sewing. So I have a lot of 80s and I have a lot of 90s. And I may start putting some of those up for sale because there's some really good stuff. I'm keeping my 90s ones though, because a lot of the ones I have from the 90s are really awesome right now. And I definitely want to sew those. So get sewing, friends, and sew the good stuff.